Good morning. Welcome to the Eastman Financial Report. I'm Dan Eastman, your host, and today is Tuesday, March 31st, 2026. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, we appreciate your viewership here at the Eastman Financial Report and throughout the day on all of the great programming you see on worldviewtube.com and, of course, here at Worldview Radio. As you know, we are a Christian broadcasting network, and it's our goal, our passion, our ministry, and our vision to be able to bring to the great marketplace of ideas all of the news and information of the day from a Christian perspective. And of course, that's what we do, and we have been doing since 2006. And we're very proud of this network, and we're also very proud to be able to continue spreading the gospel message via this medium. So if you'd like to help us in that ministry, you can do that by going to worldviewfoundation.com and making a donation. You can sign up for a one-time donation. Just go to worldview.com or worldviewfoundation.com, or you can sign up for the monthly donation program, and that has an added benefit of helping us better match our costs to our revenues. It flattens our revenue curve, better match our costs, and keeps our bottom line positive. And that, of course, allows us to broadcast free of charge. As you know, you're not paying a subscription or a paywall to see this information. Rather, you are hearing our broadcast content free, and we're broadcasting globally on a daily basis. So if you'd like to help us continue in that ministry, then you can do that by supporting us at worldviewfoundation.com and making a donation. You can also help us by doing business with the vendors you see advertising throughout the day on our network. As you know, we don't sell blocks of advertising time like the big corporate model. Rather, as an independent broadcaster, we team up with companies that we know and trust, and when they offer you goods and services on the network, a small portion of the proceeds comes back to us in the form of a commission, and that, of course, helps us in our ministry as well. And you're dealing with some very trustworthy companies. They have great products, great services, and they're friends of the network, just like you. You're friends of the network as well. There's a third way you can help us out, and that is by subscribing to our product called worldviewtube.com/vault. If you go to type that in your browser, worldviewtube.com/vault, you'll see a product that we've developed, and there is a little bit of a paywall here, but it's inexpensive. It's less than $10 a month, and you can subscribe to the Vault, which is Brandon Howe's ministry contained in digital form. It's a beautiful thing. You know, as you know, he's written 15 books, and he has had and hosted some amazing conferences and seminars. All of that information is now digital, and it is inside of the Vault with a really powerful search engine. So you can search through and find all sorts of information on all sorts of topics. And it's a beautiful thing because it encapsulates his ministry, and it's very uplifting, very spiritually uplifting. So if you subscribe, you'll have this beautiful product at your fingertips, and it's on demand. Type in your username and password, and you'll be able to get inside the Vault, and you'll see some great content. And, you know, sometimes you hit a little rough spot in your faith, or maybe just life has got you by the, you know, just got you down a little bit. That's a really great product to have at your fingertips 24/7. It's a wonderful product. And when you subscribe to the Vault, you are helping this ministry stay alive and fresh and bringing our content free of charge on the airwaves, or at least the digital pathways. And at the same time, you have a beautiful collection of ministry. Also keep in mind, we all know people in our lives who are struggling. They may have some personal problems, family problems, financial problems, career problems, whatever. And we like to think about, well, what can we do to help that person out? Well, you can take them to lunch or coffee, but for the price of lunch or coffee once a month, you can give them a gift subscription to the Vault as well. And then they have 24/7 access to the same beautiful content. And that can be very, very helpful in a person's time of need. So think about that. Subscribe to the Vault for yourself, as well as for your friends and neighbors and relatives, people you know who could really use the content. And you'll not only be helping our ministry, but you will be helping them and yourself as well. So that's how you help our ministry. You can go and make a donation, worldviewfoundation.com. And you can do business with the company's advertising, and you really should subscribe to the Vault. If you're watching our programming on a daily basis, what better thing? You say, oh, I'd like to, what did they say last week about this topic or that? Well, you click right in, do the search routine, and you can find out and refresh your recollection. And of course, it's a wonderful tool. I'll also point out that the reruns to the Eastman Financial Report live inside of the Vault. So if you're concerned about environmental issues, economic issues, or you're watching the situation in Iran and you're wondering about the oil prices, you may want to go back in and watch my reruns from the last 3 or 4 weeks because I spend a lot of time talking about the oil industry and what to expect and why we should be using critical thinking skills when analyzing the global economy rather than reacting to propaganda headlines. And boy, there's a lot of propaganda blowing both ways. Everybody's trying to position themselves. And why? Well, of course, we're in it's a midterm election year coming up, and 100% of the House of Representatives will be standing for re-election. And wouldn't that be something if they were all swept away and we brought in a new batch? It won't happen. And of course, 1/3 of the Senate as well. So it's a really good reason to be paying attention to the not only the economic situation, but also the situation in Iran. And the political sides are dueling it out, trying to convince you that the world will be coming to an end or the sun will be out and it'll be a better place. So it's worth watching. And that's why you want to tune into Worldview Tube as well, because we have some really great resources in the Middle East. People who live there and understand the situation, the politics, the culture, the military issues. And when you're watching our network throughout the day, and I do this quite often, I'll drop in because you learn so much about what's going on contemporaneously in the Middle East. But keep in mind, if you open scriptures, you open your Bible, they're talking about the very same issues and the very same people duking it out 2,000, 3,000, 3,500 years ago. And there's really, as the book of Ecclesiastes says, there's really not much new under the sun. And it's true. So it's really great to watch our content because we have some really, really accurate reporting. And we've got some very deep thinking people who are sharing their insight. And that is important. You can't just see headlines. You have to understand. Well, unless you're going to get on a plane and fly over there and start asking questions, you can watch our content and you'll learn a lot from people who are actually on the ground and very much involved in the situation. Well, let's talk about some of the economics, of course. That's what we do here on the Eastman Financial Report. And just did a check of the spot prices today because this is important to keep this in perspective. And gold, of course, is back to $4,614 an ounce. We saw it surge well over $5,000 and then collapse back down. And there were winners and there were losers in that run up. Keep in mind, in every asset class run up, there is always an inertia component where prices go up and then they correct, and prices go down and then they correct. And it's always that correction is where you don't want to be buying as it's heading toward the very top, and you don't want to be selling as it's heading toward the very bottom. It's impossible to time markets, and that's why I never give investment advice. But it's important to watch these numbers. So we see that our dear friend gold, the noble, the barbarous relic, as Mr. Keynes, John Maynard Keynes referred to it, is doing rather well these days. And of course, it's still at 46.14, which is recovered off the bottom somewhat. But I think be very careful about any time you have an illiquid asset, you have to think about that. Gold is not something that you buy and sell like a share of stock on the New York Stock Exchange or a mutual fund that you can redeem. The tangible assets, even though it's in a liquid market, there are different levels of liquidity. I think that's important for people to understand. When you buy or sell gold or silver, there's a process involved. You don't just push a button unless you've got paper gold or silver, and that's not really gold or silver, is it? It's paper. So we watch. All right, silver is also up to 74. That hit 120, and then of course is settled back, but yet coming up off the bottom. So we keep an eye on those metals for no other reason than it's a fairly good indicator of what's going on outside of the echo chamber of the Iranian situation, and there's not a lot of drama. Let's shift to the spot prices of oil. And they're up again today because as hostilities increase in the Persian Gulf area, the spot price of oil reflects the moment in time. And I talked about this yesterday on my show, the difference between the spot price of oil and contract future prices. And I talked about this last week as well. If you want to subscribe to the Vault, you can go back in and try to better understand what's happening. And that's why you have to be careful when you see the spot prices, because today the spot price is up 100, or for our friends in West Texas, that's Midland and Odessa, the great Permian Basin, it's up to $104 per barrel of oil for West Texas Intermediate crude, which is a benchmark crude. It's great oil and people like to refine it, but it's up to 104. And of course, the Brent Sea oil, which I talked about yesterday, that's the oil they have to drill way down to the bottom of the North Sea, which is a very violent sea. It's the sea the Vikings managed to paddle across to Iceland and Greenland and northern Canada and the rest of it. But the point is, Brent is up to 118 spot price again. And even our friends in Mexico, they're at $100 on the Mexican basket, which means, and I talked about this yesterday, even the shape of Mexico, they can export to both the Pacific and the Atlantic. They have a geographic advantage because of their geography, and that's why their oil tends to track West Texas. So what we're seeing is triple-digit oil. And of course, all of the prognosticators and the soothsayers and the fortune tellers on X are saying it's the end of the world. Keep in mind, when you look at those numbers, and they are up, it's like, wow, that's not so good. Oil's up 104 for West Texas. Well, that's assuming you're not an oil producer in West Texas, because I can assure you, if oil's selling at 104, there's nothing in Iran has had any effect on the production of oil in the Permian Basin. And if you're able to sell your oil at 104 instead of 67, this is a good day. This is a really good day for the producers in other parts of the world. Same thing with Mexico. Mexican oil, it tracks, and this is a really good, really good. This is a really good week for Pemex and their ability to sell their oil at a much higher price, which covers their capital cost of the pumping and pulling it out of the earth, piping it to the terminals, and then it enters the shipping system. These are high prices. The same thing with Brent. This is not hurting the investors in the Brent Sea projects any one bit, because they can pump as much oil as they want. And what it tells you is the spot price. And I talked about this yesterday. You really have to understand how the oil and refining markets work. And effectively, what you don't do when you own billions of dollars in refining equipment is go about looking for spot oil. That is not a business model. You want to be buying your oil for delivery, future delivery to your plant. In the futures market, in the NYMEX market, you're buying future oil delivery, and you're paying a contract price fixed today. If I buy a contract to deliver oil to my refinery at $100, it's kind of pricey. I'm going to buy that contract today. I'm going to pay for it. And then in 6 months, there's going to be a ship that shows up and my $100 oil will be delivered. And of course, as a production manager, that's why we look at the production manager's index. We look at inflation. That's a big part of the job. Their job is to go out globally and source the best price oil given risk. You have to factor in risk. And of course, what's the risk? Well, the risk is if you get a great deal on a boatload of oil from Saudi Arabia, the question becomes, can you get it through the Hormuz and over to my refinery? Or will it come across your pipeline to Yanbu? Can you pick it up there? And can you get it to my refinery? That's the risk. Well, the risk shifts when you do forward contracts. If I'm buying a contract to accept, whatever the standard delivery quantities are, X number of barrels, if I buy a standard contract for future delivery in 6 months at $100, it's on the seller of that contract, the counterparty of that contract, to deliver. You have a delivery obligation. It's the meeting of the minds and the bargain for exchange. The whole contract, futures are contracts. Very simple law, very simple math. So effectively, if you are the supplier and you fulfill that contract saying, yes, for $100, I will deliver a boatload of oil to your refinery 6 months from now. Well, then all of a sudden, Iran explodes and the Hormuz things becomes a problem. And lo and behold, you are pulling your oil out of Qatar or something. You have to go shopping around the globe to find that another boatload of oil so that you can deliver it to me 6 months from now on time at that price. And that's what sets the spot price. When we look at this spot price of oil, it's $104 spot price for somebody who's scrambling around trying to find a boatload of oil, and they will pay $104. Now, they sold it to me for $100, but they're going to pay $104 and they're going to lose $4 per barrel on the deal. Why do they do that? Why don't they just say, oh, too bad, I'm not delivering? Because that's not how the futures markets work. If you don't deliver the physical oil when you said at the price you said, then you get sued and of course you'll get kicked out of the NYMEX, because the whole futures market, whether it's pork bellies or corn or beans or whatever, oil all depends upon your ability to deliver at a certain price at some certain day. You have to be able to do that. And when you can, and these are not amateurs playing in that market. These are people who have developed and companies who have developed long relationships as suppliers of oil and sellers of oil, as transporters of oil, as intermediaries. This is a very sophisticated market with very sophisticated players. So effectively what happens if you can't get your oil that you were planning to get out of Kuwait, and your contract is coming due from delivery, and it takes 3-4 weeks for a boatload of oil to float over from somewhere else, you're in that spot market today and you're paying so that you can effectively serve that contract. You can perform under the contract, and that of course keeps you in the game. If you were to miss the performance, then you're effectively, your career is pretty much over, your business model is over, because nobody's going to buy a contract from somebody who can't perform and deliver, and they don't let you trade contracts or trade in the NYMEX buying and selling unless you are a proven performer. So it's really a tight network, and that's what drives the spot market for oil. And that's why when we look at these numbers, you really have to understand what's going on with respect to the suppliers and what effect it has. And the longer the Hormuz situation lasts, the bigger the problem this becomes for the suppliers who have sold those forward contracts, because they still can't get the oil out of Kuwait or Qatar or the Arab Emirates or Persia or Iran itself, or maybe even the Saudis, pumping it through their other pipeline, but it's not as much. So what do? Well, that's why they're starting to bid up the spot price of oil. Now, it's not to say, and that's why, maybe a bit tongue in cheek, I was talking about my friends down in West Texas. Love those guys, but boy, they're happy to sell all the $104 oil they can sell this week. And so are the Venezuelans, and so are the Indonesians, and so are, Bolivia makes oil, and Mexico, they're perfectly tornado shaped to be able to sell oil wherever. So all of the other oil producers are very happy to step in. And they'll say, for $104 instead of, $68, that's a great deal. We'll sell you all the oil you need. Then the risk becomes shipping. Now, one of the problems is the ships that are inside of the Persian Gulf, they're trying to get them to the outside. How do you get through the Hormuz Strait without getting blown up? That becomes a constraint on the supply chain. So however many boats are on the wrong side of the strait, they can't get out, that's how much less oil capacity can travel the globe and float about the globe delivering oil. And that does become a bit of a constraint. And that's another issue. When you look at spot price of oil, you have to look at, is that delivered FOB port, or is that price of oil plus you pay the shipping? And shipping could become a significant component if it depends on the number of tanker ships available. And keep in mind, most of them that are floating about are full of oil. You don't want to own a tanker that is not full of oil floating somewhere to deliver, because that's a stranded asset. You want to have your ships full of oil going to somewhere to drop it off, pick up oil, take it somewhere else, drop it off. That's the whole business model of shipping oil around the globe. So there's a lot to it. That's my point. So when you see these big numbers, you want to be very careful and start asking the question, what exactly am I looking at? So it's $104 per barrel. Is that FOB delivery, or is that FOB shipping point? Where is it? And secondly, why is it happening? And I'm suspecting we're going to see higher spot the longer Iran goes, because the fact is that oil that was forward purchased from Kuwait and Qatar and all those small Gulf states is going to be able to get out. So there's going to be a scramble elsewhere, which is nothing but a windfall for the people on the right side of the strait. That's the point. Hey, I've got to take a break here. I'll be right back, and we'll talk about some other issues. Hang on.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon Howse.
Okay, I'm back. So I want to talk about gasoline prices in the U.S. There's a big story today that gasoline prices are up, and of course, they're touching $4 a share in certain western states. Here in the Midwest, our prices are about $3.50 to about 3.70 cents per gallon of gasoline. But it depends where you are geographically located with respect to the refineries. That's a big part of the American system. And again, understanding the American system is important when you understand gas prices. If you look at California, and California gas prices are very, very high. And it has a lot to do with their public policy at the state level of shutting down refineries or making it so miserable for gasoline refineries to operate that the refineries close and they move away. They go somewhere else within the United States. And of course, we've seen that with a number of major oil refiners where they'll take raw oil in and they'll refine it into gasoline and diesel and airplane fuel and this and that. Have closed up shop and moved away from California because it's just simply too hostile. It's the environmental issues that are used. And of course, it's just this whole idea that gasoline-powered automobiles is a negative from the Californians' perspective, and which is interesting because the whole car culture, emerged from California back in the day. But their idea is to go green, go solar, go electric, and what you're seeing is $7-8 per gallon of gasoline in California. And unfortunately, the vast, vast, vast majority of Californians are perfectly happy to drive their gasoline-powered automobiles. This car culture is a very important thing in California. And what's happening is you're seeing public policy that is making it extremely expensive for people to operate automobiles, which squeezes the American budget because as you pay more for gasoline, obviously you have less money for other things that you need to purchase in your life. But that's their policy decision. So when we look at gasoline across the country, I think you have to put that into perspective. And of course, it's all blamed on the Iranian situation. But I've just spent 20 minutes telling you that how the oil business works. And when you see these increases in oil prices, you have to assume two things. Number one is that the people who have gasoline in the system, fill your car up at a refinery, they make vast oceans of gasoline, and it's either mostly piped, or sometimes shipped to other parts of the country. And then it's distributed. See those gas trucks that always go to the gas stations? Well, we have a big gasoline distribution terminal in my town, and it is a constant parade of these 8,000-gallon tanker trucks. They pull up, they load up, they go over to the gas station, they pump it into the tank in the gas station, they come back. This is how gasoline is distributed. So it goes from refinery to a bulk storage place in your neighborhood somewhere. And they don't tend to advertise the locations because you don't want, crazy people thinking about where these tank farms are. But from there, they get distributed to your local gas station where you buy the gasoline. Well, if you can sell your oil at 104 spot, and keep in mind, that's not the vast quantity of oil. The spot market is a very small segment of the total contract market for oil, because most of it's purchased on forward contracts. But if you can raise your prices and sell into a global economy, then you've got contracts with American refineries that you must honor. And of course, those are at $62 a barrel or 65 or whatever the number was cut 6 months ago before the war started. So how do you slow down the American economy or the American demand for gasoline to take the pressure off delivery so that you suddenly have excess that you can sell at 104 rather than 67? Well, you raise the prices because it's a supply and demand market. And what American consumers of gasoline don't quite grasp is that this is really not much to do with Iran in the short run. Remember when the war broke out and the prices went up 30 cents a gallon immediately? The oil companies set that and they raised the prices to slow aggregate demand of the consumption of gasoline. Now, this is not a progressive system. The people who have the lowest incomes and are driving their cars have the hardest time paying more for gasoline. And unfortunately, when they raise the price to slow the aggregate demand, demand so that they can reallocate production into a higher priced market. It's the American consumer, but you've got the American consumer thinking, wow, this is all because of the Iranians. And if Donald Trump wouldn't have bombed the Iranians, my gasoline bill wouldn't be as high as it is. Well, that's not quite the way it is. The fact of the matter is, when you get a disruption in global supply that allows other producers in the other parts of the world, the other parts of the globe, to sell into a much higher market and make really great profits, you have to slow down the market. And you can't default on your contracts, on your delivery contracts. But what will happen is, if the gasoline, when you refine oil into gasoline, you sell the gasoline to companies that are in the distribution business. Okay, they aren't in the oil drilling business. They're not in the oil pumping business. They're not in the oil pipeline business. They're not in the oil refining business. They are the end takers of refined products. So if you have a great big gasoline station network, like BP or Shell or Mobil or some of the bigger independents, you're buying gasoline futures from your producer, your refiner, the same way the refiner's buying on forward contract from the suppliers. And if you are running a retail and the minute prices go up 30 cents, 30, 40 cents, you can see a diminution in the number of gallons of gasoline pumped. You're not going to see a diminution in the price or your revenues. As a matter of fact, your revenues will go up. But what you'll understand is you're selling fewer gallons and you're making more revenue, which is a great place to be. But unfortunately, it takes that lower income tier of Americans who suffer the most, because obviously, a tank full of gasoline to get you to work in the grocery store, if that goes up 30%, 40%, that is a big hit. And unfortunately, that's how the market works. When you raise gasoline prices overnight, and you know very well that the gasoline was in the ground the night before, and that gasoline was paid for. So suddenly you're getting 30 cents a gallon more for the same gasoline until they use it up. But what you're effectively doing is slowing down the demand for gasoline so that you can, as a refiner, you can turn your refining to a different segment in the globe. And that's how you're capturing the $104 per barrel. So you got to slow down American consumption so you have more oil to sell into a higher market globally. That's good business. It's not necessarily good for the consumer, but that's the way the model works. So that's why it's important to understand, as we're looking at our gasoline pumps and prices, that you're all part of the process, and it's that way. That's exactly how the system is designed to slow down domestic demand so that you can sell oil into a higher spot market and into a higher contract market, because contracts will catch up if the Hormuz stays closed forever. And that's what President Trump was talking about. He said, I don't care if the Hormuz stays closed forever. It was like, what are you talking about? Well, if you watch the Eastman Financial Report reruns, I talked about this in the past as a perfect global strategy. We would close the Hormuz forever, and all of those Persian oil states would not be able to sell their oil, and they would go away. They would not have revenues. They would not be able to fund terror. They could have that inter-Islamic struggle that they've been fighting since the 680s, and it wouldn't destroy the rest of the civilized world. And we can't have a Persian Gulf damaging the global economy with 6, 7, 8 billion people on the planet. It would be a very good strategic thing for President Trump to shut the Hormuz, shut the Gulf oil producers down, and effectively bankrupt that whole area. And when you look at what's happening and how this war is being prosecuted, and President Trump's statements, he doesn't care if it's opened again. What it tells you is this is a war of economics. And what will happen after the system adjusts is you're going to be seeing guys in Midland, Texas, and Brent, North Sea, and Venezuela, which is now friendly, and all sorts of others, 95 countries that produce oil. Most of them will be much better off if we don't have this constant battle between East and West in the middle of the Middle East. If you could neutralize that for the long haul, civilized global society would be vastly better off. And I think that's what's happening. So anyway, I will talk to you again tomorrow afternoon. Be sure to go to worldviewfoundation.com and make a donation. And thank you so much for watching and supporting our network. We really appreciate you. Have a great afternoon. Bye.